Hi everyone, Crow back here again to talk a bit about the 6 games included in the Evercade's third arcade collection, Gaelco Arcade 1. Gaelco is a Spanish game developer whose name is a portmanteau of Gabinete Electrónico Consultivo, which translates to Electronic Consultative Cabinet. They were founded in 1986 and are headquartered in Barcelona, Spain. As of 2007, the company quit making video games entirely, but they are very much still an active company with their focus currently on electronic dartboards. Pico Interactive acquired the rights to Gaelco's arcade games in 2020, so I guess this collection could have been called Pico Arcade 1. In fact, it says Pico at the bottom of the box. But I'm glad they stuck with focusing on the Gaelco games in this collection, because if you're not familiar with Gaelco's games, you're going to be in for one wild ride here. All the games in this collection are a little offbeat from the standard arcade experience you may be expecting. As usual, I'll briefly talk about each game in the collection, whether or not I like the games, and afterwards I'll rank them from my least favorite to my most favorite. So, let's get started. Released to arcades in 1994, Alligator Hunt is a third-person shooter where you take control of a skateboard-riding kid defending the Earth from attacking alien reptiles. You are in direct control of the targeting reticle, but will also need to make your character dodge left and right to avoid incoming enemy fire. You're given an unlimited standard laser shot and a limited missile shot. After a couple of levels, you'll board a spaceship and take the fight to the aliens' homeworld in an attempt to completely take them out. Alligator Hunt may have been influenced by Blood Brothers, another arcade game that was released a few years earlier that plays very much the same way, but with a Western theme. The cursor is controlled by an 8-way joystick, and there are 3 buttons, one for firing guns, one for firing missiles, and the third button is used to dodge. You're only given 1 life per credit, but your damage meter should be able to last a while, and if you do die, you're able to continue right where you left off. I was pretty unfamiliar with this game, as I suspect many people are, because I don't think this game was very common in arcades, and there was no home console port. Before playing, I was under the impression that the whole game would be played as one of the kids on the skateboard, and while I guess that is technically true, after the second level, you'll encounter a brief spaceship takeoff section, and then the whole rest of the game is spent in the spaceship, and the game mechanics stay exactly the same. And it's kinda odd to see a stationary spaceship do flips to avoid enemy fire. The graphics in this game are fantastic, and the game's soundtrack is a really awesome rockin' tune. And even though it plays pretty much during the whole game, I never really got tired of it. I found that the game plays surprisingly well. Usually games where you have to use a joystick to control a targeting reticle never really feels comfortable, but it works in this game. I also never really had an issue getting my character to dodge in the direction I wanted him to, and I had a really good time with this one. But absolutely best part of the game is in between the spaceship mission levels when you communicate with the home base, because you are treated to some of the greatest dialogue ever uttered in a video game.
Yeah, there's a base to stop me.
Base to 5. Orders for you.
Stop the floor and tell me what's up.
First, destroy their computer center. Then, crash their military base. Endure combat with mutant brains. Good luck, pilot.
Okay, honey, I'm done with March then.
Utterly fantastic stuff right there. Biomechanical Toy was released to arcades in 1995 and is a single-player run-and-gun platformer. When the evil criminal Scrubby escapes captivity and steals the magic pendulum, it's up to you as the Biomechanical Toy to defeat Scrubby and return the magic pendulum before his world disappears. The game has a simple control scheme involving an 8-way joystick for movement and 2 buttons for firing your gun and jumping. Enemies can be damaged by shooting them with your upgradable gun or by jumping on them. And while jumping on them does minimal damage, it can sometimes be useful for grabbing some items or escaping some dangerous situations. In typical fashion of games of this type, you'll run and gun your way through each world, defeating a boss before continuing on to the next level, until finally defeating Scrubby. I was a little familiar with this game, as I could recognize what it was if I saw it, but I don't think I've ever played it before, and after having played it, I can honestly say that this is one action-packed, surreal fever dream of a game. The explosions are loud and large, The action is fast and frantic, and the graphics are colorfully vibrant and twistedly demented, especially when it comes to some of the bosses in the game. In every level, you'll find some sort of creature that is imprisoned, and if you free them, they can help you out for a while. The game can also be very difficult in some areas, which I can kind of understand since this is an arcade game and is attempting to squeeze as much cash out of you that it can. And while you're given 3 lives per credit, every time you die or continue, you'll have to restart at the last checkpoint you hit. There were some areas I had some issues getting through, and if I was really spending money on this game in an arcade, I may have wasted quite a bit of money without making any progress in the game whatsoever. But here on the Evercade, it's fine as there's no monetary penalty for trying over and over and over again. On the plus side, however, if you do die during a boss fight, you'll just start over at the beginning of the fight again, and I believe the boss starts with less and less health the more the fight is restarted. At least that's the way it felt to me. In the end, I do like this one. It's a pretty fascinating game. I probably wouldn't have liked the game so much if I was losing money every time I continued, but thankfully that's not the case here. Well, this is Glass, an arcade game that was originally only released in Europe around 1993. The plot, in the words of the game's intro, is as follows. Long time ago, aliens attacked us on Earth. Now we fight on their worlds. And off you go in your one-man fighter ship. This is a single-screen game where you and maybe a second player navigate your ship through 8 worlds with an 8-way joystick with 1 button to shoot aliens, 1 button to lay bombs, and 1 button to activate shields. There's a little orb that circles your ship that will eliminate tiles when they are passed over. Each world consists of 4 levels. The goal of the first 3 levels in every world is to remove all the tiles on the screen. And the 4th level is a boss fight. When you die, you get to continue exactly where you left off, and did I mention this was an adult title? You see, for every world, there's a picture of a topless woman that is slowly revealed as you complete each level. When the boss of the world is defeated, the full image is shown. Well, not only that, but before the game begins, you are given the option of girls mode or boys mode. And if boys mode is selected, the images of women are replaced with, well, dudes. Now, it has to be mentioned that this version of the game on the Evercade has been censored, so there's no images of topless women or hunky dudes to be found here. The images have all been replaced with something a little more appropriate for the 12 PEGI rating the collection carries on the box. Now, I've probably run across this title while cycling through games in MAME in the past, and I vaguely remember playing one level and then seeing the topless woman, and then I said to myself, oh, it's one of these games, and then I moved on. Primarily because most of the adult games I've played on MAME really just weren't much fun to play, and the only hook was the carrot on a stick of seeing a lewd picture of a naked lady. And is it really that much of an incentive these days where the internet makes everything so accessible with minimal effort? So, is Glass a fun enough game where it can be enjoyed in a censored manner? Well, yes, actually. I wound up thinking the game was kind of fun when I really got into it. I really enjoyed the boss fights at the end of each world, though it would get a bit annoying that the boss would always regenerate with all of its health back every time you died. Meaning that you pretty much have to defeat each boss without getting hit once. But hey, unlimited credits. I was really fascinated by the incredibly bizarre things in the game, like many of the enemies you encounter. And before each level, there's a digitized image of a woman announcing the world and level number in a very strange manner.
Robot World, Stage 1.
And the names of each of the worlds? I mean, come on. Hell's World? Lord's World? Dog's World? I mean, you really can't beat that. I also never got tired of my dude popping his head out of the spaceship after every victory to let out an enthusiastic yeah before moving on to the next level. The game certainly has entertainment value. The only thing I would have really liked is if the replacement images were a bit better. In girls mode, every single image is a silhouette of a woman against a plain white background doing some sort of pose. And in Boy's World, well, I won't lie when I tell you I was certainly surprised to find basic drawings of a cat in different poses. But the replacement images could have been anything, and they put in two-tone images that all look very similar. And I'm pretty sure one of the cat images is used twice. It would have been much better if they could have maybe put in more interesting pictures, maybe even ones that could be a scene that represents each particular world. And also, even in the original uncensored version of the game, it's just the same images for every world every time you play. It would have been a bit more interesting if there were more images and they were maybe randomized so you could get a different image for each world every time you played. I mean, that might have been an extra incentive to get somebody to play through this game a few times. In 1997, Gaelco released Snowboard Championship, which you can probably guess is a snowboarding game. The action is presented in an isometric view as your snowboarder navigates the courses downward the screen. When you start, you'll be able to select between the beginner or champion mode and then select one of 3 snowboarders representing Europe, the United States, and Japan, and then you're off to the races. I actually don't know if the different snowboarders have different stats, but I'm inclined to believe they're actually just all the same, just being a palette swap of one another. There is an option for a second player to play as well, but you'll just be taking turns. There's no simultaneous 2-player action here. While playing the game, you'll encounter 3 types of events: the giant slalom, a special slalom, and the oddly named course overall, which is just the standard run without having to zigzag in between flags, and it's basically a general speed run. The goal of each of these events is to reach the goal within 50 seconds, with the slaloms being a bit more challenging as you'll incur a time penalty for passing on the wrong side of the poles. Sometimes a loop or a tunnel will be encountered on the course, and navigating it successfully will award you some time. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I think the only difference between the beginner and champion modes is just the order in which these courses are presented. In beginner mode, you'll tackle all the speed courses first, followed by the giant slalom courses, and then finally the special slalom courses. In champion mode, you'll cycle through them, first doing a speed run, and then a giant slalom, and then a special slalom, and then repeating until all the courses are completed. The gameplay for the champion mode may be a bit faster or more difficult in some manner, but I couldn't exactly tell for sure. As for the game controls, you only have to worry about moving left and right, and the only button is the run button. Basically, holding that button will speed you up to your max speed, and if you slow down either by turning or hitting an obstacle, holding it down again will accelerate you back to full speed. The button's also used to launch you out of the gate when the race begins. I was initially playing by always holding the run button until I realized that you can take tighter turns if you turn without holding the button down. Though I must say that it took me longer than it should have to realize that. From the beginning, I was having a good time with this game, but I would sometimes find myself turning in the wrong direction, and eventually I figured out what was causing me to do so. The snowboarder moves down screen, so he is facing you, and pushing right causes him to turn towards the right side of the screen, and pushing left causes him to turn to the left side of the screen. That all seems like common sense, but my instinct was to turn from the snowboarder's perspective, which would be the reverse. If he was going straight down the screen, I probably wouldn't have had this issue, but since he's moving forward at a 45-degree angle and switching the directions he's pointing with every turn, well, I guess it kind of throws me off, and no matter how much I try, I always inevitably wind up turning the wrong way. But then I tried playing with my controller upside down, and that actually kind of worked for me, and I did much better. But I'm currently still not able to complete either mode. I initially liked the game, but as I played and played, it started to wear on me a bit, and I started not to really enjoy the slalom events all that much. I don't know if I want to play this enough to eventually beat it. I was really on the edge of whether or not I liked this game, but in the end, I think I'm just going to have to say I'm rather indifferent to it at this point.
Okay, qualify.
Released in 1992, Thunder Hoop is the first in a trilogy of games starring the titular Thunder Hoop. You know what? Scratch that. There probably isn't a Thunder Hoop 3. It's just that when I was looking up this game, the Killer List of Video Games has a Thunder Hoop 3 listed, and a couple other sites do, but I can't find any proof of its actual existence, so it's probably just Thunder Hoop and Thunder Hoop Strikes Back. Anyway, Thunder Hoop himself, as the game presents him, is a vaccine that was created to battle the destructive creatures unleashed by the evil Professor Daniel Genbrake. In this side-scrolling platform shooter, you'll control Thunder Hoop as he navigates 5 zones on his way to stop the Professor's evil plans. Thunder Hoop is equipped with an upgradable projectile attack and is also able to jump on top of most enemies, which will cause minor damage, but it can also help in getting items that may just be out of reach. Each game credit will give you 3 lives. However, you'll need to proceed carefully as Thunder Hoop will be eliminated with only 1 hit. You will be able to continue at the last checkpoint, and those do occur pretty frequently, so you won't actually lose too much ground if you die. You're also on a time limit in every stage, however it's usually not an issue to finish each level in the time allotted, although there was one instance where I cut it awfully close. I enjoyed playing through this one, and although it's a little janky here and there, the gameplay is pretty solid. About the biggest issue I had with the game was that occasionally a monster would just spawn right in front of me and I'd wind up walking right into it. It's the kind of thing where it seems like you'd only be able to avoid it if you knew it was going to appear. And you can certainly prepare for it because all that stuff is scripted in the game. It just seems like a cheap move to pull on new players. The game overall reminded me a little like Magician Lord for the Neo Geo, but I've heard some people say it reminds them of Toki. And the graphics look like something out of an Amiga game. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it seems a little unusual. Kind of like the way Thunder Hoop jumps. It just looks a little awkward, but there's really nothing wrong with it. The game has some tight situations, but I never really felt frustrated working my way through, and I really enjoyed tackling the 5 bosses at the end of each zone. The only thing I really hadn't figured out was how the power-up system actually works. Collecting different icons will change your shot, but I never really found any documentation for the game that indicates which icon does what. I mean, some are obvious, but I'll always run across these icons cycling through the numbers 9 through 0 very quickly, and I've not really figured out exactly what they did. I was hoping that maybe the Evercade manual would shed some light on this, but there's no mention of these power-ups whatsoever. In the end, though, this is still an extremely fun game with a lot of personality, and I'll no doubt be returning to this one. Maybe sooner if I could figure out exactly what these power-up icons do. World Rally was an incredibly popular overhead racing game that was released to arcades in 1993. Gaelco had third-party Ziggurat software develop the game, and while Gaelco released the game in Spain, Sigma released the game in Japan, and Atari released the game in North America. Apparently the game was incredibly difficult to emulate due to the anti-piracy implemented, but in 2008, Gaelco provided the unencrypted keys for the game's PCB, allowing for the game's emulation in MAME to finally be implemented. Gaelco even went a step further and has made the ROM image for this game available as freeware. The game is comprised of 4 rally circuits, each with 3 stages, although there's only one vehicle that you can drive in the game, a Toyota Celica. The stages may have different conditions that can change your car's performance, such as snowy roads or dirt roads, and the occasional nighttime stage which will limit your visibility. As you'll drive, you'll be warned of approaching turns and hazards, preparing you for the moments you'll need to take action. If you hit the sides of the road, you'll sometimes spin out, lose control, or crash completely, losing valuable time. Each stage will need to be completed within 60 seconds, and if you exceed that time limit, you'll need to use another credit if you want to try again. It seems that the original arcade unit of this game used a steering wheel and a gas pedal for controls, but I actually had no issue controlling the vehicle with a standard joystick. There is no button for brakes because you won't need them. You'll be able to slow down enough for tight turns just by releasing the gas. I was looking forward to playing this one because I usually like these overhead vehicle driving games, and there are quite a few that look very similar to this one, such as Overtop, the Great 1000 Mile Rally, and the bizarrely named Blomby Car. We actually already had a game like this in Pico Collection too, Racing Fever. And while I liked Racing Fever, World Rally is much more fun, I feel. But I suppose you should really expect that when comparing an arcade release to a budget Game Boy Advance title. In World Rally, I feel like I got used to how the car controlled pretty quickly, and every time I bumped into the wall or crashed, it always felt like it was my fault and I just didn't navigate the course correctly. And in the end, I could even conquer the more difficult stages, and it just makes me want to go back and play it all again to see if I can improve my times with each stage. The game does have an ending once you play through every rally, but even though you don't encounter any other vehicles, you're still in a race, and your time in each stage will indicate how you placed. So the ultimate goal in this game would be to place first in every rally, which is something that I'm far from accomplishing. So even though this game can be completed, there's still an incentive to go back and play again and improve. And that's all 6 games from Gaelco Arcade 1. Certainly some unique titles in this collection, but also a collection where there wasn't one game I didn't like. As for my least favorite game in the collection though, well, it's gotta be Snowboard Championship. Not a game I didn't like, but I can't really say I enjoyed it either. In the number 5 spot is Glass, the bizarrely censored Uncover the Picture game I like primarily because of its weirdness. At number 4 is Biomechanical Toy, a very strange game with plenty of bizarre visuals. World Rally is in the number 3 spot, a racing game I enjoyed more and more as I continued to play it. Number 2 is Thunder Hoop, once again another game with some bizarre visuals that wound up being incredibly fun to play. And finally, the number 1 spot belongs to Alligator Hunt, the addictive third-person shooter with the awesome soundtrack and incredibly strange dialogue during the cutscenes. And that's going to wrap it up for this video. In the next Evercade video, I'll talk about the 4th and most recent arcade collection, Atari Arcade 1, a collection of classic arcade games that most people will already be familiar with. Well, see you then!